I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to, no, this is not, that's not working. Let me, before I share my screen, yes, I have to actually have a window open that I want to share with you. Here it is. Okay. Now I come back. Let's see if this works. Great. Okay. Great. Somebody, hold. The only other question I still have is how do I welcome somebody in from the waiting room while I have shared my screen?
I think it'll alert you.
I think it did, but I don't see a way to go back.
Okay.
You may have to turn it off
Move your
full
mouse
screen.
to the top of the screen over the green bar.
Gotcha, participants. There you are. Great. Thank you. Got it. All right. Thank you. Okay, that was excellent. Excellent. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, you see, there's you have here a document that I made, just a list of topics. Again, topics that either I've had to deal with directly or that people are talking about out there in the world. I tried to organize them by the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, and I want to just start by going through the list, sort of sharing the question as it's been discussed, briefly describing it. Once we've had a chance to just get a sense of the scope of the halachic challenge that the last 6 weeks have presented, we're going to actually see some more detailed answers to some of these questions, looking at a text, contemporary tshuva written in the last few weeks. Okay, I'll share that also with you all. I think it's Halakhah guides our life, right? In simple times and in complicated times, and when times are new and without precedent or without recent precedent. So the task of Halakhah is to figure out what guidance it provides during times such as this. And so I think that's sort of maybe the broader significance, other than what do we do when times like these? Also, let's see how Halakhah has responded. I think the halachic scholars have responded well, actually. I think, I've been really impressed by the availability of the people I've turned to and some other major scholars who have, in the midst of all this chaos that we're all in, have managed to publish, lots and lots of writings and be incredibly responsive. And I'm really, I get paid to answer your emails and your texts, and these people don't, and yet they're really responsive. Whenever, I've gotten my calls returned under, in really, which I really appreciate, and that's helped all of you, and there are just, again, a lot of really great scholars who've been really responsive and I think responsible. So first area of Halakhah, this is Yoreh De'ah. Yoreh De'ah is ritual law. So there have been a lot of questions about mikveh use, mikveh immersion on the 8th day. Generally, women use the mikveh on the night following the 7th day of their 7 blood-free days after Nida. Some mikvahot have been closed at night because there have been curfews in certain jurisdictions, especially in Israel at certain times and places. Other mikvahot, not that they've been closed at night, but as a safety measure, they've spaced out immersions. That's less of an issue at our mikvah because we, even in the best of times, it's rare for more than maybe 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 women to use a mikvah at a time. And so the visits can be spaced. But there are mikvahot that under normal circumstances are quite busy. And in order to space out the visits so that the mikvah can be cleaned in between visits, you need to go into mikvah immersion during the 8th day. So that's one set of questions. This Talmud discusses going to the mikvah during the day under extenuating circumstances. The Talmud's extenuating circumstances are lions. If they're lions, not lines, L-I-N-E-S, lions, L-I-O-N-S, then it's not safe to be out at night. So go to mikvah during the day, to the 8th day, not this. Okay. What about cases where it's impossible to use the mikvah, either because the mikvah have been closed by health authorities, which again has happened at certain times and places and is I think a risk of happening a lot more times in places, or health authorities haven't closed the mikvah, but there are people who don't feel safe going to the mikvah because they're living with somebody who's immunocompromised, or because they're living with somebody who's symptomatic, or they themselves have been symptomatic and it's not safe for them to go to the mikvah. So they could be, nida status normally is as 2 weeks. What if it goes into 2 months? Okay, if it extends again, because they could, somebody could have been somebody who who had a baby a few weeks before quarantine, could have been in NIDA for a few weeks after childbirth, and then another couple of weeks with let's say with symptoms or whatever, or we're living with a relative who has is undergoing some sort of cancer treatment or whatever. It might be weeks and weeks without going to the mikvah. Are there halakhot? Are there all of the distancing halakhot between husband and wife during nida days? Are there room for relaxing some of those halakhot? Another mikvah-related issue is tefillat kalim, the kalim mikvah. We have shut down our kalim mikvah. All the ways in which we've added extra cleanings and extra bromine, extra filtering, and et cetera, and limiting access to the most severe instances to our person mikvah. Not really easy to do that to a kalim mikvah. Generally, they've been closed everywhere in the world. So what do you do if you get new items? How do you bring them? How do you immerse them in your kalim mikvah? So there are a number of different approaches that have been taken to resolve that series of questions by different authorities. Okay, that's another series of questions. Much more serious. Okay, what about like allocating limited numbers of ventilators? God forbid. This was a real fear about a month ago. I think it's still a risk. It seems that we've avoided, thank God, at least in Chicago, maybe throughout the United States, the worst of those fears, where you could have multiple patients needing the same ventilator to sustain them. And how would you decide how to allocate those ventilators? These are not questions that are going to poskim, right? These are not, like, no one's asking, no hospital is asking rabbis those questions, but there are Jewish doctors who are making those decisions for their hospitals. And there are Jewish doctors who will implement those decisions on behalf of the hospitals where they work. Okay, so in that sense, that's it's a very, like, the most serious halachic question imaginable, right? You have, whose blood is redder? How do you decide who gets this access to this life-saving technology under circumstance where might not be enough for everyone? Again, I don't know that those like really most fraught decisions, most challenging decisions, most sensitive decisions imaginable if they had to be implemented in any place, but certainly people are preparing to make those decisions. How are last rites provided when there are no Jewish chaplains or family members allowed into hospital ICUs? Okay, people are, when they go into hospitals with COVID symptoms, they say goodbye to their families and they will not see them again until they're discharged. And that means when under unfortunate circumstances, when people are not recovering, right, there's no chaplain necessarily available to say Shema for them, to be with them at the time of death. Who responds to that? Who does that? There's actually, I saw in New York, there's a dial-in service where you can call and somebody will hear a recording in, I think, Hebrew, English, Yiddish, and you can hear somebody. Sort of read the Shema on behalf of the sick patient. You can hold up the telephone to the patient's ear. A recording will say Shema with them or for them if no one else is possible. There's no person able to be there. When someone, God forbid, dies, how are they prepared for burial? Okay. The normal tahara procedures have been updated multiple times. The way that a body is typically cleaned to prepare for burial. Like now, the first stage was that the Chevra Kadisha, the society, the group of volunteers who prepares Jewish bodies for burial, that they should have protective clothing and they should have extra sanitation procedures in place to protect themselves. I think that's been considered not so safe in most cases, and now bodies are being buried without tahara. Okay, that took a week to get from regular procedures to no tahara, and people are going straight to burial, and I think that's pretty common now. There was a suggestion that maybe bodies have to be cremated in real severe cases of pandemic where there's have to, it's not that I think was just a threat. Or a fear. discussed in Italy. I don't think that's happened, and generally poskim remain extremely anti-cremation, and thank God has not been necessary in any place that I'm aware of. Kenny Brander got into trouble by saying if it were necessary medically and the government forced it to happen, people shouldn't feel bad about if their relatives are cremated. I think he was misquoted as "cremation is great," says famous rabbi. Okay, and he had to issue a clarifying statement. Okay, so this is your idea question. I don't know if there are others that you think I could add to this list. These are all things again that I've heard people discuss that have been relevant and either for this community or other conversations I've been a part of. Orach Chaim. Right, this is the laws of daily prayer, daily routine, the holiday, Shabbat, festivals. And because we all went into lockdown, right, I guess before, the first one, which I forgot about, right? Remember before we closed the shul, we had Purim, where the shul was still open, but there was a lot of disease going around and people were scared. And some people felt it was not safe for them to be in shul because they were in some compromised health status that put them at special risk, or they were particularly, as it turned out, wise and perspicacious about being in shul. So we had a Zoom Megillah reading. Do you remember that? Or we didn't do it through Zoom. We did it through telephone, right? It was a telephone conference call. But non-live, in-person Megillah reading was pretty common. Our shul we had a line Megillah reading at night and also during the day. And I don't know, some dozens of people fulfilled the mitzvah of Megillah through hearing it read over the telephone. That was generally endorsed by just about everyone, with a lot of hand-wringing. Okay, once we go down this path, can we ever put the genie back in the bottle? What's going to happen when everyone's healthy? Is everyone going to insist on staying at home and save money on a babysitter and listen to Megillah over the phone? Who's going to go through the effort to schlep from house to nursing homes to homebound seniors to read Megillah for them, early in the morning, people rushing off to work early in the morning? Who's going to go through that effort to convene those Megillah readings and to do the schlepping and undertake that effort, once we now know that actually you can just dial in and hear Megillah that way, and that's fine. Okay, so there's hand-wringing, but it seems to be embraced without too much stress. Chametz, can you sell your chametz to a Gentile without doing an actual kinyan with the rabbi? Normally you go in, you shake the rabbi's hand, or at least you fill out a form. What type of kinyan is necessary? So the kinyan is not really necessary. You don't actually have to shake the rabbi's hand. You don't have to hand the rabbi an item. That's a custom. It's not necessary. It's even in regular years, it's not always done. But there were some changes to selling chametz. I would just say the main one was that we didn't, instead of dozens and dozens of rabbis and selling chametz on behalf of dozens and dozens of shuls or hundreds of congregations, there were a handful of chametz sales that took place in the United States, maybe only 2 or 3. I know of 2. The CRC did one that several dozen congregations joined in with. I know there was one in New York that I think dozens or hundreds of congregations and communities took part in. So there were maybe 2 Gentiles who cornered the chametz market this year, so as to eliminate the need for people to gather and sell their chametz. A lot of, but I assume they did everything more or less as regular, as in a regular year. I would imagine. I don't know if they shook hands or not. I don't know. Maybe they skipped that part. I don't know. A lot of interest in more in Pesach leniencies, more than in normal years, because we were told avoid shopping. And if you can, regular plain unflavored yogurt can be eaten on Pesach, then that saves you a trip to the kosher marketplace, and that's good. And a lot of people took advantage of those types of leniencies. People were very eager or quick to let people know, open products can be used on Pesach even if they're open. Okay, your open thick can, a jar of oregano, doesn't have to replace with Pesach oregano. Okay, we're trying to avoid the need for people to do extra shopping trips, to spend extra time in supermarkets leading to Pesach this year, and so people shared various Pesach kashrut leniencies. People who don't usually sell their full chametz, they sell chametz derivatives, they sell things which have chametz mixed in, sold full chametz this year. because this is precisely the time, this is the circumstance, about which it's appropriate to sell chametz. It's not so easy for me to replace the food in my home. I don't want to get rid of it because it's not so easy to replace it, because I bought a lot of things. I stocked up on pasta because I'm trying to avoid going shopping, because the supermarket supply chain is not as readily replenished as it once was. So I'm going to buy 20 pounds of pasta and let it last a month. But then Pesach comes, so this is precisely the circumstance under which it's appropriate to sell your chametz to a Gentile, even if in a normal year you try to do without taking advantage of that loophole. There was a huge discussion about how to respond to the fear of isolation and loneliness over the so-called 3-day Yom Tov, Pesach leading into Shabbat. People who live alone, some of them were really concerned about being alone for that many hours. And many of their friends and family were concerned about them being alone for many hours. And there are a lot of suggestions that were promulgated on how to alleviate that loneliness. On one end, you had a group of Moroccan rabbis in Israel saying you should gather for the Seder over Zoom and set up the Zoom call before Yontif begins and keep it going into Yontif. And that way, the grandparents aren't by themselves. They can be with the grandchildren, and the whole family can gather together at Leil HaSeder. There were others who said maybe that's not necessarily the most pragmatic solution. Seder over Zoom can be a little bit of cacophonous. Zoom is not great for more than one person talking at once. And maybe there are ways just to set up phone trees so that everybody who's vulnerable and at risk of being alone for so many days, let them get called and let them know people whom they can call. And we tried to do this in our shul. We let people know that a number of us kept our phones on, and that people could call us over Yom Tov and Shabbat, and we would alleviate their loneliness, get them assistance if they needed assistance. And I think that was done by many, many congregations. A lot of discussion about mitzvot over Zoom, electronic communications, for example, can Kaddish be recited? Over Zoom? Can a minyan be created over Zoom? These are actually different questions. Kaddish maybe can be said without a minyan, or that's at least Rav Melamed suggested that you can't have a minyan over Zoom, but you can still say Kaddish. That's a bit, but that alone was sort of not widely accepted, and he hasn't written out exactly how he came to that conclusion. I mentioned also Seder over Zoom. I talked about that already. Also, the other idea is the other idea would be Seder in 2 parts, and the shul shared a document encouraging people to do that and explaining how that might work. Seder in 2 parts. You do all the parts of the Seder that can be done before Yontif, before dark. Certainly the fun songs at the end and your karpas and all those things. You do those things over Zoom with your family, and then before sunset, turn off the computer, light your candles, daven Mariv, and after dark, you do the mitzvot of the night that require dark, essence of Magid and all the eating mitzvot. In Israel, you have this phenomenon of minyanim from porches, mirpasot, decks and porches. It seems to be that the common understanding is that if people can see one another, then they can join together in a minyan. This is not obvious that be the case, but that seems to be the widely accepted halakhah, and you find this really touching accounts and recordings of minyanim taking place in religious neighborhoods where 20, 30 people are all praying together, each from their own balcony, joining together in that way. It seems if they can see each other, they can join. Another series of Orach Chaim questions. These are, again, like Hilchot Shabbat questions about just physicians being involved in life-saving sort of interventions over the course of Shabbat. That's sort of obvious. That's not like a new thing. Of course, physicians can break Shabbat when human life is on the line. I think sort of the questions that were new were, there's the issue of there's the patient who's in front of me right now. So obviously, if a patient needs me, I break Shabbat to heal them. And more, I'm responsible for a department, or I'm responsible for coming up with a treatment protocol for this particular illness. And there is a flood of information, a flow of information. And if I aren't reading emails if I'm not reading emails over Shabbat, then I will if not reading emails over Shabbat, then I'm not going to um, be able to keep up with it. Somebody sent in a note. Balcony davening. Does everyone have to see each other? Can one person see a few people? Those few people see other people. Somehow they all right. So it's a good question. I think the truth is I actually don't know. I don't know. The shortest possible answer to that question is I don't know whether everyone in the balcony minion has to see one another. But I'm sure this has been written about, and the other.
But Rabbi, didn't we
Yeah.
learn about this in Daf Yomi?
Did we?
So yes.
Okay.
So if there's a waiter, he can connect different groups of people.
Oh, that's right. So the waiter connects different groups. Those different groups that are all in the same room, right? The waiter can create a zimun. He's going from table to table. He can connect the two tables. He's eating a little bit from each of the tables as he waits. So he's connected. They're all in the same room. Whereas in the balcony minyan,
so they're all within the same eruv.
Same eruv. That's true. Okay. Lots are written about it. We can look at one of those two in greater detail if this is a question that is particularly compelling. I think I did a little bit of study. It was a day, like all the days when I'm whatever it was. It was like an online of course an online shiur, and I also had to sort socks because no one else is doing laundry now. So I can't say I was 100% when I was learning about this, but I can tell you that it's complicated. It's not a simple thing. There is precedent. There's actually some interesting precedent there was a case. There was a city in Italy where everyone had to go into quarantine before they entered the city in the 17th century. And so they would have these types of minyanim where people would go out onto their balconies and you would see somebody else and you would have 2 or 3 Jewish families, groups staying in this quarantine, and they would all see each other from these balconies. So that did exist. Then assuming it does exist, how do you read the Torah in a situation like that? Like, where's the Torah? Where's the, that's sort of interesting, right? Because if you, and that's I think a future question that I think is going to be really interesting, like X number of weeks from now, X number of months from now, when it is safe to go back and let's say it's, I don't want to pick a month. I don't want to predict anything. Let's say it's, let's say it's December. In December, let's say we're allowed to go back into shul. It's safe to come back into shul, but only 1/3 capacity, and you can't be within a 6-foot radius of anyone else. So how are we going to read Torah under situations like that? Normally when we read Torah, we have 4 men huddled over the bima together. Very, very close, almost touching or very, very close. So can the Torah be read if the Balkore is in the middle of the shul at the bima and the Ola is saying the brachas from his seat? And the Gabbai is who knows where. Is that possible or not? Okay, that's like that's an interesting, that's like another Torah reading question that's related to, I guess, Minya from Portuguese. So I guess I'll say you have, what about Torah reading without proximity, which leads to also bar mitzvah questions, right? Bat mitzvah questions, like somebody had that's sort of how do you celebrate a life cycle event of that kind when you can't come to shul? And what if you are able to come to shul, but do you have to make up all the parshiot that you missed? That's also, maybe we'll have this again for the future. Maybe we'll have Shabbat when we're all back in shul. We're gonna have to. What about all the Torah portions that we missed? How can we have Simchas Torah if we didn't read the whole Torah? So we have to catch up somehow, right? This is discussed in Halakhah literature. If you miss 1 week or 2 weeks for some reason, you read a double portion, and there are circumstances where you can catch up. But if you miss, multiple months, how do you catch up from that? It's a little harder to contemplate. But if you don't catch up, then you wouldn't have read the Torah. How do you, that's really hard, right? So we'll figure that. It's it's a question for the future, and hopefully we'll agree on one thing to do. And the other question, sort of people aren't physicians, but who were involved in the medical profession in some way. For example, hospital administrators or people supporting hospital administrators, et cetera, right? Can they work on Shabbat? Somebody is, let's say I'm a vaccine researcher, okay, and I'm heading a team at some pharmaceutical company and I'm developing a vaccine. So if I am out of commission on Shabbat, so that's going to delay the progress of our vaccine, right? So that would be that type of question as well has been raised. Evan Ha'ezer, this is issues of marriage and divorce. So how does a wedding take place under social isolation? What's the minimum number of people who have to be present at a wedding? How close do you have to be to each other? What about a get, a divorce? Usually the husband gives he hands the get to his wife, right? So she accepts it in her hand. What if she's wearing gloves? Does that work? Does that count? I think so, but that's been discussed. And then Choshen Mishpat, these are kind of the most complicated questions. These are the monetary questions. So if you have, like what's your obligation to people whom you are paying to do work that they're not doing? You have a nanny, or you have a babysitter, or a housekeeper, right? So they're not allowed to come into your house. You still pay them or not, okay? What's your obligation to them? How does that get worked through? The Rabbinical Council of Bergen County sent a letter to the entire Bergen County's Teaneck, like Greater Teaneck, that region. They sent a letter saying, if you have somebody who's been coming into your home once a week to clean, or twice, whatever it is, to clean your home, they can't come into your home, of course, but you still should pay them. And they sent that out to the entire community. Rabbi Reese here in Chicago has been giving similar guidance as well. What about more complicated deposit? You have a deposit on a rental. We were going to go away for vacation this summer, and we already paid a deposit on the home we were going to rent, and I don't think we're going to get that back, even though we're not going to go there this summer. Okay. What about a wedding hall? The wedding can't take place in that wedding hall, right? So who's responsible for that? And those are also very complicated questions. So there's a lot of topics. These are ones that I thought of. I didn't spend this is not comprehensive, but just to get a sense of how Halakhah has had to respond, again, to things without recent precedent or without precedent altogether. I want to share now, at least, let's read, so start delving into at least some answers. So I want to, and I think we'll spend the rest of the next 15 minutes on that tonight. And I think next time we'll spend more time inside in the text itself. And the text I want to share with you, I think I have to stop the screen share though to find your text for you. Maybe not, I don't know, but here it is. Okay. I'll share the link in the chat if you want to download this yourself and follow along in that way. Vinny Cohen, the twilight bark of davening. I don't think I understand what that was a reference to.
In 101 Dalmatians, the dogs all communicate by barking from one to the other across the city.
Excellent.
It's related to the davening idea we were talking about before.
Excellent. Great. Okay. Okay. It's also a thing in Russian prisons. I don't know, in Darkness at Noon. I think they tap on the prison walls, and that's how they pass messages back and forth. But yours is a much more positive. Oops, sorry, I responded.
This is a very different kind of reference.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Okay, that's the link, and I will also screen share now. These are Tshuvot. This is a collection of Tshuvot that was published on Erev Pesach, maybe the day before Erev Pesach. So that's just an incredible accomplishment. This is I should go back to the front page. This is Rabbi Asher Weiss, who is an up and coming posek. He's a very, very influential. I guess for a great halachic scholar, he's young because he's probably in the 60s or 70s. So that counts as young for a significant Talmud Chacham, and he has real crossover appeal. Okay, this was shared by the Rabbinical Alliance, which is a Haredi rabbinic organization, but there are lots of modern Orthodox Jews who really admire him and respect his judgment and his Torah learning, and I have come to really appreciate him. Also because he's a very clear writer, so it's good in terms of a source to study together. He's a very clear writer, and that's good. So he published this 100-page little document of responses in the midst of all the busyness of Pesach. Okay, so you can just see just the table of contents. It's pretty impressive. Okay, and we'll sort of go through a few of them, and I'll just sort of read the first couple of them, and then we'll look at one. Okay, so first one. What's appropriate conduct when there is a plague? Fine. The obligation to practice good hygiene and preventive medicine. Very nice. Here's a whole thing. He investigates the story that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter told the community of Vilna in 1830 something, when there was a cholera epidemic. They should all eat on Yom Kippur. And according to this legend, he actually got up in shul on Yom Kippur and made kiddush. And then he ate a piece of cake in shul on Yom Kippur to encourage everyone to eat so as to fortify themselves in the face of this cholera epidemic. Rav Asher Weiss does not like that story. He thinks the story is apocryphal. He quotes a couple of contemporary sources who say it never happened, and he doesn't understand like why, if if you're sick and you need to eat, so you should eat. But for a healthy person to break his fast doesn't seem to be warranted unless it's medically necessary. Okay, and there isn't, and maybe for some diseases it is, like cholera, kills you by dehydration, and like it affects your stomach. Other types of diseases really don't, and you're not necessarily at any great risk if you fast, even in a time of plague. So he doesn't like that story so much. I love the story very much. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story of how important the value of human. So whether it happened or not, okay, I understand. Maybe it didn't happen, but I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story. In terms of it, did it happen or not? But it doesn't matter. The Chafetz Chaim, the Yisrael Kagan, was once testifying in court on behalf of a Jewish kid who was on trial for, I think, deserting from the Russian army. And the lawyer was trying to explain to the judge just who this rabbi was as a character witness. So he said, the Chafetz Chaim, in addition to being a Rosh Yeshiva and a great scholar, he and his wife ran a dry goods store, a grocery store. That's how they supported themselves. And once he caught a shoplifter who was stealing from his store, and he chased him down the street yelling, "Hefker, Hefker, it's yours, I give it to you." He didn't want anyone to be guilty, of the sin of stealing on his behalf. So he chased down the thief to be mafkir, to declare ownerless. So the judge heard the story and said, I don't, you expect me to believe that story? And the lawyer said, look, I don't know if the story is true or not, but they don't tell stories like that about you or me. So I feel like the story of Salanter, whether it's true or not, whether it's the most halakhically sound practice or not, I think it's a beautiful story that speaks to the primacy of human life and protecting human life, even in the context of Yom Kippur. I shared the story one Yom Kippur at our show. I spoke about it. Okay, but the fifth. The fourth tshuva is about doctors to shave in order to wear protective masks. The fifth one, I think I want to look at inside with you, okay? This is somebody who does something about endangering the members of your own household in order to save someone else, okay? So let's look at that one together. That's on page 18. And I think that'll be our inside Torah content for tonight. Again, and we'll have, I think the next two sessions, we'll go through some more of these tshuva from this book, this collection here. Okay, here's the case. B'chaver hatzalah shisto chola b'tirshat hanifutza. Okay, so a hatzalah ambulance driver, EMT, whose wife has multiple sclerosis. Shehi machala kasheh shepagad gam b'marechet hachisonit, and which also is a very challenging condition that also affects the immune system. Hayim alav lamshich b'avodato sheyesh ba hatzalat nefashot, shema alav l'chshosh shizabek v'yamid et ishto b'sakana. Should he continue to be involved in his life-saving activities as an EMT, even if it puts his wife at risk, that he could contract a contagious disease that she is especially vulnerable, particularly vulnerable for because of her multiple sclerosis. All right. Without seeing his answer, anyone want to take a guess of what either can unmute yourself and say yes or no, and why, or just even yes or no? It's like just unfettered by knowledge. What's your first instinct? Anyone?
I would say if there's somebody who can take care of his wife, then maybe he should temporarily live elsewhere during the epidemic.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so he could write. So that he has this special training. That's a special obligation that's imposed on him because he has these skills that can save lives. So his wife does not have to live with him. She's like, okay, she needs special medical care. Her sister, she go move in with her sister, and he'll move back in 6 months or in 18 months, whenever it's safe. Okay. Any other just premises, instinct? Very cautious. Yeah. Okay. I won't call on you. We're gonna go on. הנה, כבר דנתי באריכות בכמה מקומות באיזו מידה האדם חייב לסכן את עצמו כדי להציל את חברו, וביארתי שדבר תלוי במידת הסכנה שהוא נוטל על עצמו, לעומת גודל הסכנה שממנו הוא מציל את חברו, עיין שוב מחדש. So I've already written about this other topic of how much risk must somebody impose upon himself to save another's life. That's a very well-established halachic topic. Comes up in the context of all sorts of military rescue operations or any circumstance where you might put yourself at risk to save another. It's a fraught halachic topic. I've dealt with it. And really the answer is how much risk. Okay, you look at longer truth on that. Midat chasidutu. Okay, the so too is the greater act of piety in engaging in this action of saving someone else, even at the risk to yourself.
Am I the only one who missed some of that? It sort of froze and I didn't hear.
You are probably not the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, you also? Okay, sorry. I will go back and say it again. You missed the support now. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll say it again. Where we go? Here it is. Okay, he said there, when I dealt with this at great length, I said that the lower the risk to the rescuer and the greater the risk to the rescuee, such the greater obligation there is, or the great, he says, the midat chasidut, the greater act of piety it is to engage in life-saving. So it's that's you put your multivariable calculus, okay? Like you put in the X variable is the risk to the rescuer, and your Y variable is the danger that the potential victim is in, and that's how you put in your inputs, and that's how you get the output is, you should, how important it is and how valuable it is to do this. The Od Zot Biarti, I've also explained, חברה אנושית צורך חיוני בהצלה מותר לאנשים לנדב בעוז רוחם לעסוק בהצלה כמו שוטרים, כבאים, אנשים המאומנים להצילת אלה אנשים שנטרפו בלב ים או שנפלו מצוק הרים וקדומים. So he also says, it's very interesting, that the greater the societal need is for people who take on these dangerous life-saving jobs, so too it's permissible to do these jobs. It's one thing, I'm walking down the street and I see somebody in danger and I can, do I or do I not intervene at risk to myself? That's like one series of questions. But in order for society to function, somebody has to be a lifeguard, somebody has to be a firefighter, somebody has to be a police officer. These are needs of human society. And so since these are human social needs, I'm allowed to take on those jobs, and somebody is allowed to fulfill these jobs because it's fulfilling an important social need. Lichora, nearly fized de gam ben yodidan alav lasot malachato lamshich latzil nefashot uzachut harabim hagen alav v'al bnei beito v'al bnei beito ach bemet nira she'ein davar ken mitrei utlat ta'ameh. Okay, so it would seem, therefore, since there's a need for firefighters, and so somebody's allowed to become a firefighter and habitually put oneself at risk to save others, so it should be no different to be an EMT. It's a profession that's necessary for society to function, so I can take on that job, and the merit of the multitudes will protect me and my family. But he said, not so simple, and there are three reasons why it's not so simple. He actually says 2 or 3 reasons, and then he gives 3 reasons. I don't know why he doesn't like the third one, but that's okay. 1. מחלת הקורונה מדבקת מאוד, ואי אפשר לעמוד ולהעריך את הסיכון שמא ידבק במחלה, ופרט כאשר הוא עוסק בהצלה ונחשף לחולים רבים. מתוך בדיקת נתוני החולים, והתברר שאחוז גבוה הם רופאים וצוותי רפואה שנדבקו על ידי החולים שבהם טיפלו, וכל גוון צריך גדול אם יש עליו מצווה לסכן את אשתו כדי להציל אחרים. So corona is a particularly infectious disease, and it's particularly dangerous to medical providers. And a great number of medical providers, physicians, nurses, EMTs have gotten sick. And because it's not just if you're an EMT, then eventually you might encounter somebody with an infectious disease. No, there's a pandemic, a deadly pandemic. And if you're an EMT, you're constantly answering these 911 calls and rescuing people with corona who are having difficulty breathing and taken to the hospital. And there really is no way to fully protect oneself against that kind of repeated risk from such an infectious disease. And so in a circumstance of that kind, is there a mitzvah to endanger his wife in order to save these other people? 2. בסכנה מועטת להציל אחרים, אין לרשות לסכן את פלוני כדי להציל את אלמוני. ופרט בידו דידן שאשתו נמצאת בסיכון גבוה, ואם נדבק במחלה הוא, מכניס את אשתו לסכנה גדולה, מהיכי תמצא יעשה כן. Even if somebody has a right to risk his own life to save others, what right does he have to risk X's life to save Y? And the risk to his wife is severe. She has multiple sclerosis. She's in a compromised situation in a serious, serious way. And so the whole discussion that we have of under what circumstances is it permissible to put oneself at risk to save others, that's not really relevant to putting somebody else at risk to save a third person. And where does he get the right to put his wife at risk to save these other people in the population? 3. Hello, Efshar. למצווה זו לעשות על ידי אחרים. ואין זה דומה לשאר שטחי הצלה, שבהם מה בינו לבין האחרים. הלא כל אחד מסתכן באותו מידה. משום כן מותר להם לנהוג כן. אבל בינו דידן שהוא מסכן על אשתו, במידה יתרה מסכנה הרובצת על שאר אנשי דעלמא, עדיף שתעשה מצווה זו על ידי אחרים. So when if this is a mitzvah that falls on anyone, right? There are an entire profession of EMTs and medical workers, all of whom are capable of providing this life-saving service. And he has a greater risk because he's living with a wife with multiple sclerosis. So this is a mitzvah, this life-saving mitzvah should be done by others and not by this individual who's at greater risk. Okay, concluding paragraph, I'm sorry, I'm over 2 minutes. So please stay with me for the concluding paragraph. משום כך נראה דקשה לפי תר המצוקה ברור שלא מדובר במי שיש חשש נדבק בקורונה כגון בתאונת דרכים או ילד שנפל וכדומה, רשותו להגיב ולהגיע כדי להושיט עזרה, אך כל שלפי קריאת המצוקה יש מקום לחשוש שמדובר במי שחלה במחלה זו, לא ילך. So he can still go to work as an EMT and respond to traffic accidents and little kids who fall out of trees. He can do those, if there's no special risk, he can continue to work as an EMT. But when the call is from somebody with difficulty breathing and there's some strong likelihood this is a corona sick person, he should not go to those emergency calls. And therefore, it's just better, he should not engage at all in this line of work until this Yavor Za'am, this wrath passes. It's impossible to stay entirely safe. So he should really avoid all human contact as much as possible. He should not be out and about while this pandemic exists with his sick wife at home. Unless he has some sort of there's some I think a lack amongst EMT drivers. There's a shortage of EMTs, and if he doesn't do it, there'll be a real risk, a much more severe. In other words, it's a profession. Anyone in the profession can do this job. It's extra dangerous for him. He shouldn't do it. If there's a real shortage, and his lack of going out in these EMT calls will actually be directly dangerous for the population at large, then that's a different circumstance. But that, he says, seems a little far-fetched. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father in heaven should prevent plague from our portion. So that's the end of the tshuva. Okay. So I think next time we'll skip the introduction, but maybe if things come to between now and then, any new questions that I add to my list, I'll review with you and just discuss, and maybe we'll do a few other tshuva from here. But you're welcome to look on your own, and if you have questions that you want to address Dafka in particular, as we gather next time, please send them to me, and we can talk about them in the class. So thank you. I'm going to stop the sharing.